Today, we're talking about the biggest lesson that the Chicago Bulls learned in last night's loss against the Detroit Pistons. We're also going to be talking about the Anthony Davis trade rumors and if it makes sense for the Chicago Bulls to go out and trade for Anthony Davis. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Monis Mazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And let's start here with the growth through the grind here of the NBA season for the Chicago Bulls. And really, I think the biggest lesson that they learned from last night's game, and I think really the biggest lesson that they've learned really all season so far, and that's that they're going to have to play hard every night. They cannot get away with not playing hard and just really coming with the consistent effort and energy necessary to go out there and compete. This team will need to do that regardless if a team is not at full strength or if they are at full strength. Either way, the Bulls cannot afford to not have a max effort level. And so, in fact, one of the things that is said after the game in Billy Donovan's press conference is this. He says that this team is not talented enough not to play desperate. And so, that just kind of goes into really what I'm saying here is that the Bulls have to come out with that type of desperation and just that type of 1-2 every night to give themselves a chance here. And I think that that's something that they did here early on, when they were winning games and stuff like that. I know, even during the losses here, I think that they have shown that for the most part as well. But this last game, I think that it was a complete, just dud here. I think that they completely were flat in this game, and I just really think that they dropped a major opportunity. And so, not to harp too much there on just really a tough loss, because trust me, this was just tough to watch. But I will say this, there are some positive things out of this situation, and really I continue to say it because I think that the one thing that I am seeing with this Chicago Bulls team is that they really do have a style and an identity. It's more so just getting it consistent, because I think that once they do get that consistent, and then also too, you continue to kind of tighten up the personnel as you continue to build this team, I really do think that you're trending in the right direction. And I still believe that this team very much so can make the playoffs. And I absolutely think that they can win out of the play-in situation and qualify for the playoffs that way. Because one of the things that I do like about what we're seeing here with the wins or the losses has been really the strength in numbers, because I think that the strength in numbers really with what we're seeing off the bench has been great, with Kevin Huerter, Ayo Dosunmu, Jalen Smith, even Patrick Williams. Like, I'm loving what I'm seeing here with these guys coming in collectively and just really picking up the slack, because if this team gets off to a slow start, they've been able to go ahead and pick it up for the team. Then also too, one of the things that I talked about with Kevin Huerter last night was his ability to come off of the bench and be a starter. We know Ayo Dosunmu can do that as well. And so I think that that is huge for your team, because injuries, they happen in the NBA. And so the fact that this team is able to step up the way that they do, I love that. And then also too, you got to love the fact that even a guy like Javon Carter, who really doesn't get minutes like that, is the pro's pro, and he stays ready. And so I love that about this team. And then next, just going into some of the other stuff too, as far as the growth with this team, like, I am liking what I am seeing from our younger players. And so Monis Mazelis, look, I know it has been a bit of a struggle, especially with the turnovers and him putting the basketball, on the deck and trying to get to his handle and everything else. Like, he's certainly struggled at times with the turnovers and things like that. But still, I think defensively, you're seeing some signs there. He's got to stay out of foul trouble. I am liking the fact that he's been pretty efficient, I think, for the most part, as far as scoring the basketball. And I'm very impressed with the way that he hit the boards yesterday. Like, I love seeing that with Monis Mazelis. I think that that's certainly something that he can get even better at when you're talking about doing something that is just not being a scorer. And then with Josh Giddey, I think that he's already shown that he's taken a step forward. I think a guy like Trey Jones that was with us last season, much like Kevin Huerter, these guys are showing, hey, they were, just good trade pieces here for the Chicago Bulls because they fit in and they're doing some great stuff for us. Trey Jones, another guy like Kevin Huerter that has shown that, look, he can start or come off the bench. He plays with a high level of basketball IQ defensively, one of the top in the NBA in steals. And so really getting it done there. And so that once this team gets everybody back, they're going to have a chance to really rip off some runs here throughout this season, and it's not going to be this tough throughout the schedule. And so I think that is another thing that you have to be excited about. And, lastly, just kind of going back to the situation with Kobe White, look, they're expecting him at some point soon. And so I do believe that once he gets back out there with Josh Giddey, you're going to start to see that type of rhythm and that type of run that we saw towards the end of last season. And so I'm just excited to see once this team gets back whole. You still have Zach Collins as well to throw out there in the rotation. Hopefully Billy Donovan doesn't forget about Jalen Smith because he certainly deserved a lot more run the way that he started off the season and really stepped up in the absence of Zach Collins. And so, I just think that there's a lot of good stuff here through this growth. The NBA season is a real grind. You have to stay with it. And I think that the bottom line here is that the Bulls just really, to me, it comes down to consistency. I think if it comes down to anything else, it's consistency. And so do I think that the personnel is necessarily where it needs to be just yet? No, I think that they still are going to have to address that front court. I think that is going to be an obvious situation. But right now, I think that they're figuring out some of the stuff that they need to with their younger players. I think that a guy like Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, even with the limited minutes that they're getting, you're starting to continue that evaluation and figure out, okay, hey, are these, maybe some of our long-term pieces? Do we need to shift and things like that? And so I think that things are becoming a lot more clear here with the Chicago Bulls team. But what's really going to help them is getting more consistent. And so as they do that, I think that this Bulls team will be trending in the right direction even more this season. And so with that being said, I wanted to go ahead and jump into really these trade rumors here with Anthony Davis. And so I got a chance to see this in a couple different places. And then I also read about this here on Bleacher Nation. This is written by Elias Schuster, and it's a very good piece here because he mentions just a couple, beautiful points in here. And so, within this article, you find out that the buzz has really picked up a lot here with Anthony Davis being on the move. And I think that really what it comes down to right now with Anthony Davis in this situation is that the Dallas Mavericks just got rid of Nico Harrison here. And so Nico Harrison, he was the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks. And so they moved on from him. Obviously, there was a lot of talk around him for moving off of Luka and that wild trade last year and everything else. And so he's fired. And now you just wonder, okay, what is the direction or the future here for the Dallas Mavericks? Because, they have a situation now where it's like, hey, do you tear it down? Do you move Kyrie? Do you move Anthony Davis? Do you go, kind of all in here with Cooper Flag? And so here's where I'm at with it. I think that Anthony Davis is certainly going to be on the move. If you go and you look into this article, one of the lines here, I believe it's the third paragraph down, it says that Mark Stein really kicked things into high gear on his Substack. He reported that Davis's camp is expected to work closely with the Mavericks over the next couple of months and monitor whether an in-season trade makes sense. And so that right there, if that is true, then that means that certainly Anthony Davis is going to be on the move somewhere. Is he going to be on the move towards Chicago? Like, that is a question here, and I'm sure there's other teams out there as well, but I would think that Anthony Davis, number one, would probably want to go where he could probably maybe immediately win a championship, and I'm not sure that it's going to be here with Chicago. And so I think that, number one, he is going to move. I do think that the Mavs are going to move off him. I mean, that's just my personal feeling with this. I just think that for the Chicago Bulls, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And so one of the things that's pointed out here within this article is that he's due $175.4 million for the next couple seasons. And so that's just kind of breaking down his contract. And so right now, just kind of bringing it up, you can see that, look, man, he's owed, the $58 million. And then that's going to go all the way up there to 62 by the time he gets to that last year in his contract. He's going to be 34. And oh, by the way, he has a player option. And so, I think one of the reasons why I don't necessarily believe this makes sense for the Chicago Bulls is because when you look at that salary there, the Bulls, made some moves here to kind of go ahead and free up that cap sheet and really have this flexibility. When they went ahead, they moved off Zach LaVine and just really kind of pivoted off of this last team. And so I'm not sure that it necessarily makes sense to kind of go in here with Anthony Davis and that type of salary. And then on top of that, with Anthony Davis, the biggest issue with him, and it always has been, is just the fact that he's just not stayed healthy. And so one of the things that's also pointed out, within this Bleacher Nation article is it says that he played in 14 of the possible 45 games since leaving the Lakers to the Dallas Mavericks. And then also, too, talking about a player that's going to be getting older. He also has the player option. He's set to make a lot more money. And I just don't think that the Bulls really should be looking to throw out the picks to go get Anthony Davis. I don't think he's necessarily worth the money here. And I think that the bottom line is that you really need to trust the process with your youth movement. Like, that is one of the biggest things that AK has really done with this team is he's pivoted and the team has gotten younger and they've adjusted with this playing style. And so I think that that is something that you want to continue to build on. And I think that the fact that you have still the control of your draft picks and things like that, if you're talking about trying to get a superstar player, look, you can get a superstar player in the draft. Now, I'm not going to say that, hey, a lot of people are going to say, well, man, you got to tank and you got to get this high draft pick and everything else. That's not necessarily true. I understand that, that is part of the equation, but you might get a player that is going to be right there for you if you are picking, in the 12, 13, 14. You just never know what can happen in the NBA draft. Just because a guy goes in the top 5, it doesn't mean that that player, is going to turn that franchise around. It just all comes down to, hey, how are you evaluating players? How are you evaluating what they're going to do with your team? Like, how are you building and everything else? And so if you do that, I think that it eventually pans out for you. And so I'm not sure that the Chicago Bulls really should take those draft picks and just really put it all in for a guy like Anthony Davis, because you're then going to shorten your window as well. And so that's another thing. You're taking away some of your youth. You're taking away, your ability to build for the future. And then really you're kind of shrinking your window now because it's more so a win now situation. I don't think that this team is necessarily it for that right now. And I do think that if they are to continue to really get the consistency, then you can start to maybe revisit this, but I still wouldn't go with Anthony Davis. I think that there's other stars to go out there and get. And really, if the Mavericks are looking to go out there and they are looking to, trade off the team and stuff like that now that Nico Harrison is not there, I think that one of the players that the Bulls should really take a look at is maybe bringing a guy like Daniel Gafford back. I think that maybe makes a lot more sense, especially when you look at like the contract for Daniel Gafford and just what he does. Like, I think that maybe makes a lot more sense for you. As you can see, he doesn't have the player option. He's going to be 30 by the time he gets to the end of his deal. And that is a very, tradable contract right there, especially in the way that the CBA and stuff like that is set up, and what it takes to get a deal done like that, who knows? But I think that it would be far cheaper to go out and get a guy like Daniel Gafford than it would be to get an Anthony Davis. And I think that he also would fit your timeline a little bit better, talking about a guy like Daniel Gafford. And so, just kind of looking at the roster just side by side here, again, you would definitely you're going to have to combine some salaries out there. And so I think that Vooch would probably be a guy that would certainly be on the move here. I've seen stuff where, people have thrown in the expiring contracts like a Kevin Huerter and a Zach Collins. I think that Kobe White certainly has been there, which is another thing too as well. I'm not in the camp of moving off of Kobe White. And then also too, I've seen some stuff where Patrick Williams has been, possibly floated in a deal like that. And so I just don't know if that necessarily would even move the needle here, for the Dallas Mavericks and things like that. But that's kind of where I'm at as far as going off and trading for Anthony Davis. I just don't think that it necessarily makes a lot of sense here. And so, anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here. Do you think that, look, an Anthony Davis type of trade to the Chicago Bulls would really move the needle here? Again, this is just rumors. That's another thing, too, that you will see, in this article that I was checking out here from Elias Schuster on Bleacher Nation. It's just something that's really circulating out there. There's like a couple different media outlets talking about this. And so it mentioned like CBS Sports, Sam Quinn talking about it, Zach Lowe, then also to SB Nation's Ricky O'Donnell. And so just to name off a couple of writers and just kind of media people out there that have just talked about this and just maybe thinking of the possibility of Anthony Davis maybe moving to the Chicago Bulls. And so, again, a complete rumor, but I'm just saying, even if this were something that the Bulls were actually thinking about, I don't think that this makes a whole bunch of sense here for the Chicago Bulls. And so, anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, look, go Bulls. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.